Hello everybody, my name is Chikirza, and welcome to another art journal video, where I'm playing with supplies that I bought at various dollar stores. I'm securing my flexible cutting board that I bought at the dollar store to my page with a strip of masking tape, like I normally do. I found these really cute stamps at the dollar store and couldn't resist buying them, so I'm just selecting a few that I might want to use on this page today. These look interesting. Now what do I want to do with them? I can't make up my mind, so I decided to just get started. I pull out my Ranger Archival ink pad, and the pattern on that box that I pulled the ink pad out of gave me an idea. I have this stencil that also has the same sort of like a beehive type of pattern on it. Go ahead and stamp a couple of bees. And grab a scrap piece of paper that I've been just wiping off paint and stamps and whatever on to get rid of the excess paint off the stamp. Now I'm going in with this stencil and just a regular black ballpoint pen and using the stencil to create a pattern on the paper. I'm being really random with where I'm putting the marks on the paper. No idea what I wanted this page to look like in the end, which, if you've watched any of my videos, you know I just do things as I feel as I go along. I never have a plan. But it always seems to come together in the end. Yep. I think that's where we'll stop here. Now I have this paint by Apple Barrel. This color in particular, I don't know if it's a bad bottle of paint or if it's just the way this color is all the time, but it's really, really watery. I want to use it just in case it is starting to go bad. I only bought it about 6 months ago or so, so it shouldn't be bad, but I don't know, it's really, really watery. I know that normal craft paints are generally watery, but this one is really, really watery. But it worked out to my advantage because I'm using it to cover up the page and give myself a background color. I didn't want something that was going to give me full coverage, so this works perfectly. Adding a little bit more paint because it wasn't giving me the coverage that I wanted. It was fairly streaky. I wasn't looking for coverage. I was just looking for some sort of an even distribution of color on the background. And I make sure that the layers are dry in between each stage. So I grabbed a baby wipe and I've got this neon blue acrylic paint and a darker blue acrylic paint. Just trying to stay all in the same color family, like blues. Can't decide which color I want to use. I mean, there's so many choices. Do I do the neon blue or do I do the slightly brighter blue? I decided to start off with the neon. Now, neon acrylic paints are typically very transparent from my experience. Which is good because I have no idea what I want to do with this page, but let's just ease into it. So I'm using the wet baby wipe and just rubbing the paint through the stencil. I'm not dabbing it or anything, I'm literally just rubbing it across the stencil. Okay, I like it. And I was going to do the bottom of the page, but then I realized that the paint was wet, and I didn't want to take the chance on smearing the paint all over the page when part of the stencil was going to cover it when I was doing the bottom part of the page. So I was still looking at these flower stamps and trying to decide what I want to do next. So then I come in with the brighter blue and decide maybe I'll do some sort of a gradient-ish type of beehive-looking thing. Not really sure, but I'm going to try and just experiment and see what happens. So I decided to start dabbing the paint on instead of swiping it. And that's where I had the bleed through. So the issue was I had too much paint on the cloth being the baby wipe. So the right side turned out a lot better than the left side. And then when I cleaned off the stencil on the bottom part of the page, I actually really liked that effect better than I did on the top part of the page, where I was using more paint. So I decided to just keep going with it. I got paint all over me. So I'm going in with the color that I used in the background again, and just going in and smearing it around with my fingers. Not using a brush. I just want to cover it mostly, but not necessarily have to cover all of it. But definitely on that top left side, I definitely want to cover up that big blotch that ended up there when I was trying to put the paint through the stencil. I have a friend who suggested that because I'm always touching the paint to check to see if it's wet or not and smearing the paint, that I should maybe just get it out of my system. And she'll know who she is when she watches this video. This part's for you. So I redo the top part of the page using the same technique as what I did on the bottom part of the page, using way less paint and just rubbing it across, using the darker color instead of using the neon color. And it's working really well. And then to get a little bit more of kind of a random pattern, so you have light and dark and kind of almost like a gradient, and some shows up, some doesn't. I'm doing a combination of dabbing and swiping and a little bit more paint and a little bit less paint. And I want to go in and just touch up the bottom so that the bottom and the top match a little bit better. I still think that the bottom of the page turned out way better than the top at this point. But I'm not done. I can fix this. This is acrylic paint. You can fix anything. Just dabbing on some paint on the very edges where I missed some. Going in with a little bit of the neon now, because I think that the top is too dark, too heavy. I don't have enough of a gradient, and just adding a little bit more of the gradient, bringing it down. And now I think it matches a little bit better. Okay, time to stop fussing with the background. What am I going to do with these stamps? I decided against using the flowers. I want to use the bee, but maybe I can draw my own bee. So I go in with my white Stabilo All pencil. I use this pencil a lot because it's water soluble. So you could use a watercolor pencil if you wanted, or even probably, well, I mean, you could use an erasable colored pencil or a pencil or whatever you want. I just wanted to put something in that wasn't going to show up until I had an idea of where I wanted things. So I'm using a black ballpoint pen now that I've got sort of an idea of where the lines are going to be. And now you can see what I could see with the white pencil. So now I'm coming in with the white apple barrel paint. And I want to cover up the background on the parts that I'm going to color the lighter or brighter colors. So it's a bumblebee. She's going to have stripes. Making sure that I really get some good coverage in there. Filling in the wings. And then I thought, hold on. Maybe I don't want the wings to be that opaque. Maybe I want them to be somewhat transparent. So I dabbed some of the paint off, and I'm coming in with a wet brush here and just dabbing some more of the paint off, trying to lift some of that white paint back off. I know it looks like I'm putting white paint on, but it's actually just the residue that is on the page and on the brush in the first place. Trying to get rid of those white harsh lines around the edge. Trying to make the wings look somewhat transparent. I don't know how I'm actually going to do this at this point. Just playing around with the paint and seeing how I can make it work. Filling in the lips because I don't want them to be dark. I want this bee to be nice and bright. I want her to pop off the page. And this is a queen bee, so she's got to have a crown. And filling it in with white just to make sure that I've got the opacity and the background is covered up. I'm going to use the rest of that white paint so I don't waste it on that scrap piece of paper again. Going in with a toothbrush and just smearing it on the page. I have no idea what I'm going to use this page for. Maybe we'll do a project with it in the future, or maybe it'll be part of a collage, or I have no idea. All I know is I have extra paint on that plate and I don't want to waste it, so I'm using it up in some random way. The other thing you could do is you could use it on a separate page in your art journal. Now it's time to give her color. So I'm painting over top of the white stripes with the yellow acrylic paint from the dollar store. So as I'm painting here, you'll notice that a lot of the supplies I use come from the dollar store, or they're very inexpensive. All the brushes that I use come from the dollar stores. I don't shop at just one dollar store, I shop at various dollar stores. It doesn't have to be big chain ones, it can be the little dollar stores that you find. It doesn't necessarily have to be Dollarama or Dollar Tree, but just various dollar stores. And I do that because I'm trying to encourage everybody else to go ahead and be creative. You don't have to have all the expensive supplies. If you can afford it and you want to, go for it. But if you'd like to do it on the cheap like I do, the dollar store and Walmart can be your best friend. So I just went in with a second coat of yellow, making sure that it's really nice and bright. And making sure that it's nice and dry before I go on to the next stage. Bringing back that piece of paper again, using up the rest of the yellow that's on my plate. Now that plate came from the dollar store, and I use it just for my acrylic paints when I'm painting. Now I'm coming in with the black craft acrylic paint from the dollar store. Oh, I changed my mind. I'm going to use this gold acrylic paint from the dollar store. I want to do her crown before I do the black on the body, so that if I get messy with the gold, I can use the black to cover up the mistakes. It has a nice sheen to it, but this over top of the white, I need a few coats of it to get the coverage that I want. I can still see the white through it. This paint, however, if you use it over top of the black acrylic paint, it goes on beautifully. So had I known that I was going to make the crown gold, I probably would have painted the background of that crown black instead. So that was the second coat. And you can still see a little bit of the white shining through. I go in with my black acrylic paint pen that I picked up at Walmart and do some outlining. Get some defining lines going before I start painting the black of the bee. And now I realize I'm probably going to run into the same problem painting the front part of the bee black, just like I did with the last video that I did with a bumblebee in it, and I did the face black. I'm going to lose the big end of the mouth. But I don't really have a whole lot of choice here because of the way I've outlined it. So I'm just going in. I'm already committed. And that black paint pen from Walmart, for whatever reason, when I use it over top of the apple barrel white acrylic paint, it doesn't go on very nicely. And I'm not sure if they just don't get along very well. It works well over top of other paints, but just that white one does not play nice with that paint pen. So I just touched up the parts of the eyeball that needed touching up with the black acrylic paint from the bottle and a brush. Doing the black stripes on the bumblebee. I went up into the wing area a little bit, but because the paint was still wet, I went in with a wet, clean brush, rubbed at the black part, and then dabbed it off with a paper towel. And I did the same thing on the crown part there too. I got a little bit of black on the crown. So I just fixed it up with a wet paintbrush and dabbed it with the paper towel. So this is the neon acrylic paint that we were using in the background. And I wanted to play with sort of a gradient transparency for the wings. So I'm adding a little bit of the paint and smearing it with my finger. My thought was the neon colors are really transparent, so it should work really well. Unfortunately, it covered up too much of the white. So I go in with a little bit of the white and it watered down, and try dabbing that on and dabbing it with my fingers and just trying to get some of the white back. I don't really know how to do the transparency part. I'm just playing around and seeing what I like. So I did that on the other wing. And it's okay. Add a little bit to the inside of the wing for sort of like a shadow effect. And then I come in with the darker blue that we used in the background and do the same thing. I'm maybe trying to deepen it a little bit more. And then I put a splotch right up the center thinking, oh, well, that can be like the vein, or I'm not really sure. And then I didn't like it, so I smeared it out. And once again, I got rid of the white. So I go back in with the white again. All just trial and error, trying to find something that'll work. I want a little bit of the background to be showing through, but I thought too much of the background was showing through before. And then I come in with the black paint pen and outline those lines again, because I ended up with the white on top of the lines. And now I'm looking at this bumblebee stamp again. I'm still not sure what I want to do with it, so rather than committing to it, I go in with the red acrylic paint from the dollar store. Now this red, I know it's not a neon red, but it's really transparent. And I don't know if that's typical of red acrylic paints, but it was really nice because I didn't have to worry about being super detailed and around the black lines. I could literally just paint it on over top of the black, and it was all good. It was amazing. I loved it. I'm still looking at that stamp. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to stamp these bees on here? Still can't decide. So I do something else. I put some gems on her crown. Every queen bee needs to have gems. And I'm using my fancy dotting tool, the back end of my paintbrush. So I pull out these flowers and a butterfly. I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll do the flowers. I'm still really thinking about trying to get those flowers onto this page. It's like, well, let's just go in at the bumblebees. Let's see how that works first. And once they're on, you're committed. And I grab that piece of paper again and stamp off the excess ink. Make sure if you're using this Ranger archival ink that you make sure that that ink is completely dry before you add any paint to it. It does take longer to dry than some other inks, but it is completely permanent once it is dry. So here I'm just going to go in with some yellow acrylic paint from the dollar store. It's just craft paint again. And color in the stripe and the front part of the bumblebees, the little ones from the stamp. So I'm going to do that, and I'll bring you back when it's done. And we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, now we're done. I'm coming in with a regular black ballpoint pen, just a cheap ballpoint pen. And I was curious if it would work over top of this craft acrylic paint. And to my surprise, it worked really well. So I outlined the bumblebees and decided to put the faces back on. But since I'd already painted over the faces, I could put my own faces on. So I put one with his tongue sticking out, one with a big grin, and one with the original smile that was on the stamp in the first place. Adding a couple of lines to the crown with the black acrylic paint pen again. Using the ballpoint pen to outline the gems. And I thought that the background needed a little bit more defining. So I go in with the black ballpoint pen and just outline some of those shapes. Add some black to the background, give it some definition, give it some randomness. I'm being really loose, just scribbling in the lines. They're not perfect, but I don't want it to be perfect. I just want to add some interest, some dimension, a little bit more boldness. Maybe tie it together a little bit more than it already is. Trying to be as random as I can with picking what ones to do. Add a couple more up top. Couple more down in the bottom, where I thought it was missing some. And then just a couple more up top again. And there we go. I decided that was it. I was finished. You can see the shine on the crown from the gold. See you next time. Thank you very much for watching.